Tonight, we go to, let's go to Matthew, chapter 2. Since we're still in the Christmas season, even though Jesus Christ was not born on December 25th, I decided to at least preach one more message. And this is about the Star of Bethlehem and Jesus' wealth. Well, I thought he wasn't wealthy. What makes you think that? I know what people are going to say, because wasn't Jesus the one that said he didn't have a place to basically lodge at or sleep? Yes. And that's because he was on a mission. He was not going to preach one Sunday or Sabbath on a Saturday and then not preach again for 3 or 4 weeks. Jesus' ministry was always on the move. A lot of people misunderstood what's being said there. Matthew 2. Let's start there. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. Let's just average out. These wise men came about, let's just put an average on it, about 18 months after Jesus' birth. They weren't there at his birth. And they came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. Now, do I believe there was a lot of heavenly messages in the stars concerning Jesus' birth? Obviously, if you listen to me any length of time, you know what I think about that. There's a gospel in the skies that delivers the wonderful message that Jesus would come and he would be crushing the serpent and providing salvation. But the word star, you can highlight it there. And of course, it became popular to believe it's a star in the heavenlies that guided these wise men from the Persian area, about 1,000 miles of guidance in the skies, to exactly where Jesus was born. The only problem is they didn't go to exactly where Jesus was born, because they went about 6 miles south of where Jesus was born, and Jesus was not even close to Jerusalem by the time they arrived. There he was about 65 miles north. So their GPS was off. And of course, there's been quite a few teachers and even pastors that try to point to one star and say that's the Star of Bethlehem. I'm not saying it didn't have any significance, but that's not what this scripture is referring to. And I know most of you have been taught differently. Well, that's what this ministry does. It turns upside down what you know, or what you think you know, because you've been taught by preachers that do very little research. They're not biblical detectives, and they just keep preaching what they learn in their Bible schools or their Sunday schools or whatever they went to before they decided to become a preacher. Now the word star is used interchangeably for angel. So it could mean an angel, it could mean a messenger, or even Jesus himself. Let's go to Old and New Testament, I'll give you two verses to look at. Numbers 24. Verse 17. Verse 24:17 reads, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not now. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Set. Now, who's referring to? A star in the heavens that's going to smite them? No. Here, as you see in the Old Testament, a star out of Jacob would refer to a person in the future, and that would be Jesus Christ. Go to Revelation 22. Let's pick one verse out of the New Testament. Verse 16. I, Jesus speaking here, if you have a red letter Bible, you can see it was Jesus that was sending the message, directly himself. I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star. Both passages here is referring to Jesus, one in the future and one is still in one in the future looking ahead from the Old Testament timeline, and one in the future for us that's still yet to come in the New Testament age. Now, like I said, it could mean angel, it could mean messenger, or even Jesus himself. Well, it can't be Jesus in this verse. An inanimate object is not an it, but a person, either male or female. The star in this verse being referred to has the consistent parsing of a male that met them, and not an inanimate object. Because you look down to verse 7, then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. Verse 9. When they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them. Now, if you were Herod or any of his spies, and for some reason you believe that earlier when they mentioned a star, that they would have a close observance of what was happening in the heavens. Could you see the star during the day? Could you see the star during the night if it was actually a star? Or what happened if it was an angel that was guiding these wise men to eventually get to Jesus and to present him gifts, give him praise? For they knew he was the king of all kings. The kings mentioned that they met the star when they were in the east, when they were back at their home location, and they were led to Israel. They were just told to go to Israel, and that's where they would find Jesus. And when they got to Israel, 1,000 miles later, They didn't know where to go. So they inquired of Herod and his scholars. If it was a star in the skies, it didn't come with a set of directions of what the actual address Jesus was living at the time when they arrived. That angel just told them to go to Israel. And then when they got to Israel, and when they departed from Herod's presence, when they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding joy. This is not talking about a star in the sky. This is referring to something not what most people teach. This is referring to an angel that was guiding them during their journey to go see Jesus. Now, Herod left them with the impression that Jesus was possibly still in Bethlehem, which is about 6 miles from Jerusalem. And when they met Herod, and then Herod pretty much told him to keep him informed, because he already had a plot. He wanted to kill every male child that was born around the time of Jesus was born. But that angel, in my opinion, was not seen by Herod or any of his scholars or spies or soldiers. That angel was only seen by those 3 kings, those 3 wise men. And they didn't go southeast to Bethlehem, where Herod thought this Jesus might still be living. The angel told them to go 65 miles north of Jerusalem. And you read Luke chapter 2, you don't have to go there. I got it marked in my Bible. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Mary and Joseph went to Jerusalem to dedicate Jesus to the Lord, and then back home to Nazareth. That's in Luke 21, and jump over to Luke 2:39. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Mary and Joseph went to Jerusalem, almost kind of like a circle, to dedicate Jesus, the Lord, according to Luke 2:21. And then when you get to Luke 2:39, it says then they went back home to Nazareth. And when the wise men finally met up with Jesus, they gave him gifts. He probably was an average about 18 months old. And the question is, what kind of gifts are we talking about? Of course, you know about them. And I'm going to read something to you that puts the whole story in a different light. Because how rich was the wise men who came to worship Jesus? Did these wise men, with their gifts, gave enough money for that family to be supported, and also Jesus' ministry? Now, the economic status, I'm going to read this to you now, of Jesus' family was anything but rich before his birth. This situation, however, would dramatically change with the appearance of the wise men. Before the Magi's arrival, Mary and Joseph could not afford much beyond the necessities of life. given Joseph's job as a skilled craftsman or carpenter. The family was not rich by any means, but rather lived, in our modern terminology, from paycheck to paycheck. After the birth of the Savior, the family travels to Jerusalem's temple to present him before God, which we already read you the verses, and to give the required offering. Unable to afford the more costly offering of a 1-year-old lamb and either a dove or a pigeon, they gave the far less expensive 2 pigeons or doves. If you want to read about that, that's also in Luke chapter 2. The Magi brought far more treasure, including silver and gold, as an offering to Christ than most people think. What did they do? When they finally got to meet Jesus, the Christ, they gave an offering. How many people actually preach these days? And how many people go up to an altar call and lay down their offering at that salvation moment? Something to think about. The wise man delegation was offering tribute money to a king, and therefore would more likely have brought a whole train of pack of animals loaded with the gold, the frankincense, and myrrh. They regarded Jesus as royalty, as they should. And it was the ancient custom to give a royal personage a truly worthy gift when coming into his presence. Since the wise men were directed to Jesus by an angel of God, their sense of awe likely resulted in usually large gifts being given to Jesus. After the wise men leave Bethlehem, an angel tells Joseph to take his family and flee to Egypt. Mary and Joseph, who only recently barely afforded a temple offering of 2 birds, now have the financial means to not only travel to Egypt, which is a fulfillment of prophecy, but also to stay there at least 5 months. The family, upon the death of Herod, then make the long trip back to Nazareth. God made sure, though the riches of the wise men, that his beloved son had the resources available in order for his life to be protected. The possible benefits received from the gifts left by the wise men do not end. Joseph, Jesus' stepfather, died sometime between Christ's 12th birthday and several years before his ministry starts at 30. His death leaves at least 6 children, not including Jesus, without a father and a breadwinner. How did Mary, as a widow, afford to raise and feed 7 children total? It appears highly likely that the riches given by the Magi helped sustain the family after Joseph's death. The riches freely given by the wise men may have also funded Jesus' ministry. Consider the following possibility. There is no hint in the Gospels that Christ ever asked for donations, although some, out of generosity, did willingly support him. The ongoing expenses for 12 men traveling for at least 3 years would have been significant. Remember, none of the disciples were rich, and all had left everything to follow him. Judas regularly stole from the disciples' collective money bag, an act which would be easily noticeable had the group had little cash. The Bible also indicates that the group regularly gave money to the poor. Where did all the support come from? For group expenses, aid to the poor, and so on, if not at least partially from the wise men. Jesus had enough finances not only to take care of his disciples, but also to give to the less fortunate. It is entirely possible that the wise men gave big enough offering to the Lord to fund his public preaching gospel. Now, some have made the attempt, my friends, to calculate how much those gifts could have been. And this might blow your mind. Using today's values, it would have been 2 to 4 million. Wait till the prophecy teachers are going to get their hands on that. I mean, not prophecy. Prosperity teachers get their hands on that kind of information. 2 to 4 million. I believe closer to the 4 million when you run the numbers. We are led to believe that they came with a little chest of these gifts and they presented it to Jesus in a manger. First of all, he was not in a manger any longer. He was around 18 months. These wise men were guided by an angel, not a star in the sky, an angel that traveled 1,000 miles to the west from where their location was. Just to see a baby? Think about it. These were kings themselves. These wise men traveled 1,000 miles westward. And then when they get to Israel, they really didn't know where to go. They were just told to go to Israel by this angel. I think that's fairly obvious. And then when they got there, they inquired where this Jesus might be, and Herod didn't know about it. Neither his scholars. And then, after leaving, Herod and his mob behind, the angel once again appeared, and this time guided them to the actual physical address where Jesus was living. And what did they do? They did what they were called to do. They did what I believe they thought was their mission. And of course, this is left out of the story. For whatever reason, I don't know. It doesn't matter. But they were called to bring an offering to the King of Kings that would sustain their family. Jesus was not a lowly carpenter. Not that I'm saying carpenters are lowly, but in those days, they were not considered rich. I do agree. They were living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes barely making it probably. They had a large family, at least 9 people to support. God provided through willing earthly kings that recognized a greater king. And they provided an enormous amount of wealth for their time that would sustain Jesus for 33 years and his family. Yes, Joseph did die somewhere between 12 and 30. What was Mary going to do? Most of those, or all those children that Joseph and Mary had outside of Jesus were all younger than Jesus. What if Joseph died when Jesus was 15? All his siblings would have been much younger. What was Mary going to do? Or even 20. because that's when the Hebrew became an adult in their system. God provided. Jesus left behind riches beyond any of our imagination. 4 million is just not even tip money for him compared to what he left behind. But it was enough to sustain his life, his family's life, the ministry, the people around him. And not just, I disagree with something I read to you concerning the finances. Jesus' group was a lot bigger than 12. There's 12 close individuals called the disciples. But it was a larger group than that. How was it all being sustained? And yes, it's true. Christ didn't go around collecting offerings. He received them. But most of the people that were presenting any type of offerings were not wealthy people. They were just getting by themselves. Most of them came because they needed a need fulfilled. They didn't come like the wise kings to lay their treasures at Jesus' feet. And when you put this all together and you piece it all together as biblical detectives, you can see how all this plays out. But it has to start, not the wise men saw a star in the sky and decided, let's go see what this leads us. Even if they knew how to read the stars and the gospel message in the skies, and they probably might have that kind of information. But if they did, and if they knew they had to act upon it, an angel would not have to been sent. Both times before they got to Jesus. God provided for his only begotten Son. He knew what he's going to have to ask him to do, and Jesus did it willingly. But God provided his only begotten Son and his family and his, as we would call, team around him, the provisions to get the gospel out there, to get the message that Jesus brought with him and what he would do for our benefit. And it's still true today. It costs everyone something when they come to the presence of Jesus. Well, I can't be saved if I don't give an offering. No, I'm not saying that at all. It's none of our works. But out of gratitude, you can't wait to jump to that opportunity to show your praise and worship to the King of Kings. I was never a fan of pastors taking up Christmas offerings for themselves. Never a fan. I am a fan of taking up offerings to honor and praise and show our worth to the King of Kings, and using those offerings to keep getting the message out about the one who came, the one who died, the one who resurrected, and the one that's coming back again. I just wanted to straighten out some of the history tonight of how this went down and what was the result of it. Those kings were chosen to support Jesus' 33-year ministry and life, and the team that was around them, including the family members. God uses people to fulfill his purposes. I know it doesn't sound like a Christmas message, But there's not a more important one. In fact, if you look through scriptures in the Gospels, we're really never told to celebrate Jesus' birthday. Find it. I challenge you. We're not told to celebrate Jesus' birthday. We are told to remember Jesus' death and resurrection and his coming again over and over in the New Testament. Interesting, isn't it? Well, I have no problem of remembering Jesus' birthday. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But his birth date would not meant anything unless he stayed true to the mission. Because I would not have a rebirth date if he didn't. Well, thank God he did. I have more to this message, but maybe next year. But for now, I just want to straighten out a little bit of that history and give you a little bit more insight why those wise men even made that trip to go worship and honor and show their worship to the King of Kings. Thank God they were faithful to their calling. You got it? If you do, let me know. Play the song.